So today's guest speaker, I have the pleasure to introduce Adam Gilshnan. Adam has been through cancer himself. He's what I would call a young fella. He's in his 50s. And,
Young
um,
fellow.
and I guess because of that and working within the health system himself, he has a passion for helping people through their health journey, which he does, I'm guessing, through his job. So he's a healthcare navigator, which he'll explain what that is, for the West Coast Primary Health Organisation. He's going to talk about his experience from diagnosis to treatment and where he is today. And he likes helping people, like many of us that are involved in this in the various organisations out there. So he's going to give some tips and advice and possibly some takeaways for us. And the other thing of note, I tried contacting Adam the other night, and he said, "Look, I can't talk right now. I'm at a rugby game. I'm at a test game." And so he had the pleasure of seeing that test. But of note, Adam, being a rugby enthusiast, he's the creator of the West Coast Rugby Museum. Now, isn't that interesting? That's pretty cool, eh? Welcome.
Well, thanks very much for the introduction, Paul, and gentlemen, really nice sharing the afternoon with you all. Lovely to hear a little bit about your last couple of weeks. And I'll start off with the most important thing, the weather. You'll be happy to know it's a beautiful sunny day down here in Greymouth, probably about 12, 13 degrees. I walked to work this morning, took me about 40 minutes, and I'll be walking home again, and I didn't bring a jacket, so I'm pretty confident. And for those in Taranaki, please give my love to the mountain. My dad was brought up in Alton at a dairy factory, and my mother was born in Waverley. My older sister in Waverley. She was born in Patea, rather. My older brother in Waverley also. So I'm very fond of Taranaki. All my family are from the area, although I was born in the South Island. As my dad was a traffic officer, very transient. So I love the Taranaki, so please give my regards to the mountain when the mist and cloud lifts. It's a very special
It was
place.
there this morning, but it's not there now.
Yeah, true.
You might have taken it away for renovating or something. It'll come back later probably.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason we're all here, first of all, I think it's fantastic that Look Good Feel Better do this. It's not something that I've done before. Speak about my journey. I've done that a long time ago, but to have this now, online is a wonderful thing. So I guess for me, it all started on the 31st of May 2002, when I got a phone call from my GP, actually, of all things. Prior to that, I'd had a few symptoms of a bit of back pain, mainly a little bit of stomach pain every now and then. I put things down to my job as a publican here at the Railway Hotel in Greymouth, lifting kegs. I thought, well, that's why my back's sore. Stomach complaints. Well, I don't eat regular times. I'm all over the show depending on what time we close up. The pub was very busy, late nights and the weekend, sometimes early during the week when it was quiet. And like a lot of us men, put things off. We get the ailments. The car rattles, we'll take it into the mechanic, but if we rattle, we just we soldier on, don't we? At times. So I actually went to the physio, of all things, with my sore back, and it was my business partner at the pub. His brother was the physio, and as I was laying on my stomach on the physio bed, he was sorting out the back. I had this intense pain in my abdomen. And he said, "Are you all right?" I said, yeah, just my stomach's a bit, stomach ache. So he carried on, and then the pain, I'd never felt that before. He said, "Let me have a look." And as soon as he started to feel my stomach, he realised straight away something was amiss. I was pretty oblivious. And he goes, "Right, okay," because he would have felt a mass there that, I thought I had a bit of a gut, if you like some of us do. I was 29 at the time. I'd actually tried sit-ups, would you believe, to try and remove my stomach, that was getting a little bit bigger, not knowing there was something a bit more nefarious there. So my physio said, "Adam, I'm going to write a note. You need to go and see the GP straight away." He wasn't trying to alarm me. I was just, oh, okay. I took the letter off to the GP. And I was lucky I got in straight away, and he palpated the area and he said, "Have you been unwell?" I said, "No, just back pain, stomach pain." Okay. He goes, "I think you've got a large abdominal cyst and we need to get a scan." So I had a scan, and I remember the person scanning looked around the side at me from behind where they take the scan. And I think he must have been thinking, this guy has no idea, but he's got something really bad happening there. So back to the 31st of May 2002, when the GP rang me with my results. And he told me I had cancer, pretty much. It was a Friday night. And he said, "You'll need to get over to Christchurch first thing tomorrow morning." So I was just about to start my shift at the pub on a Friday night. I started at 5:30. It was a long weekend. So I phoned downstairs to my brother-in-law, my business partner, told him he needed to come up, and I told the news to him. And Dad was in the bar on a Friday night having a drink. I said, "You need to get Dad up here." I sat down and told Dad, and then we said, "Right, we need to ring your mum." So I rang Mum, who lives in town, and she came over. And she knew I'd been for a scan. But I guess, telling Mum face to face was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Lucky for me, single at the time. No kids, no girlfriend. So that was a blessing. But yeah, that was obviously very emotional. Telling her that, and the look of horror on her face still haunts me, to be honest. So that was pretty hard, as when you tell your loved ones what's happening. So obviously didn't work that night. I went over to my parents' house in Cobden. Obviously couldn't sleep. A lot of things going through my mind, not knowing where we're at. Actually, the 2002 Football World Cup had just started, or starting that night. So I remember watching France versus Senegal, and Senegal upset the French. I think it was 1-0, and I didn't sleep much, but drove to Christchurch the next day. Eventually had a few more tests over there. Got to meet an oncologist first off, and then a hematologist. And they said, "Rightio, you're here now. You're going to be having some chemotherapy." So had about 3.5 months worth of chemotherapy with an aggressive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The lump or growth in my abdomen was the size of a small football, rugby ball. Obviously, like I said, I had a bit of a gut. I thought it was a bear gut, but there was this large tumour sitting there. Had a little bit of my neck as well that travelled up through the lymphatic system. They were able to cut that out. I've got a little scar there somewhere, but they weren't able to cut out or remove any of the tumour. So that had to be through pretty aggressive chemotherapy. I guess the hard thing for that 3.5 months, I was in the isolation room, and I wasn't allowed to leave that room unless my neutrophil count was over 0.5, I think it was. And that wasn't very often. So the tough thing was every day they'd put the white cell count up on the whiteboard, the red cell, the platelets, and the neutrophils. And if my neutrophils were over 0.5, I could at least get out and have a look around the corridor, for 5 or 10 minutes. But the majority of that 3.5 months was spent in my room. Obviously, they're giving you this toxic chemotherapy that, while it's there to save your life, it also makes you very sick, as I'm sure some of you are aware. But just being stuck in the room, just feeling absolutely awful was the hardest thing. I think mentally I struggled. I remember times where I just went into Michelle. Luckily for me, my brother lived in Christchurch. He's 10 years older than me, so he was able to be a good support. But, obviously my parents and my twin sister and older sister were in Greymouth. But Mum and Dad decided they wanted to be with me 100% of the time. So Mum would spend 2 weeks with me. I'm not sure if you've heard of Ranui House, a bit like one of the Ronald McDonald houses in Christchurch. So Mum spent 2 weeks to Dad's 1 week. So I always have one of them there. But, I still, had a lot of dark times. The one thing I never ever thought was, why me? I didn't wallow in self-pity. I was pretty understanding it was happening. I was 29 years old. I guess for me, it was like, why not me? I'm not special. I'm no different from anybody else. It's just, a bit of bad luck, really. I think people always assume when you're battling this, and I heard it from a lot of people, you must be pretty strong. You're going through this hell. But I didn't find an inner strength. I don't think it was just something that was happening at the time. So it's like getting on board a roller coaster, I suppose. You just jump on, you're strapped in, and it's just going to take you wherever it wants to go. So there'll be days where you feel fine, other days where you just feel worse. You're on the toilet, you're vomiting at one end, and you've got your diarrhea or whatever going at the other, and you've got your mucositis, your mouth ulcers that happen, and you're just miserable. I guess one of the hardest things I think for me was the food in the hospital. My worst time of day was looking at the menu in the morning, and some of the food. I was on a PI diet, which is a protective isolation diet. So the food had to be boiled beyond belief. Like the mince was just a flat mince. Potatoes were just nothing was edible really. So obviously I lost a lot of weight in between that and the chemotherapy, and the heavy nausea that came along. But so I beg your pardon? Oh, sorry, I thought someone said something. So that was 3.5 months. So that was really tough mentally. I remember at one stage they could tell that I was suffering pretty bad, with it all. And I had a friend that I used to be a postie in Christchurch prior to being a publican. And there was a game of rugby at Lancaster Park. It was a Ranfurly Shield match against Hawke's Bay. And one of my mates at New Zealand Post managed to get me out and help me up the steps. And we sat in the corporate box and just to feel some sense of normality again, even just for an afternoon. Obviously I'd lost a lot of weight and didn't have any hair. Or actually, it was on the high dose prednisone as well. So I had moon face. I'm not sure if you've come across that at all. I remember one of the nurses one day saying, "Hey, look, when you look in the mirror, don't worry. When you're off the prednisone, your face will go back to normal." And I hadn't looked in the mirror in a month or so, but when I looked at myself, I just had this massive head. People say I've got a big head anyway, but it was just this massive, all the water retention around my cheeks and underneath my chin. So I guess when people come to see me, that's what they saw, and it was hard for people. They were looking at me, but also looking away, not knowing where to look. So I guess I felt sorry for them more than myself. What I found tough, or found interesting rather, I should say, is some people that I hadn't seen in a long, long time come out of the woodwork, and all of a sudden they wanted to support you, which I felt was really humbling and satisfying, I guess. But then the others you think were going to be there for you that weren't. And I understood why. It's just that they didn't know how to deal with it. They were afraid to see you like they were. They were aware that you might not make it through this. And I think for some of them it was almost like ignorance is bliss. We don't go and see them. I know, and they were thinking they should, but they just didn't want to face up with it. So, I felt bad for them, if you like. So after the 3.5 months of chemo, they weren't sure if it had shrunk the tumour right down. So I actually had a little bit of a chance to come back to Greymouth for a few days. They said they were going to make the next plan from there. Once they had some test results back, they then decided to send me over to Sydney for a PET scan, which you couldn't get in New Zealand at the time. So I'd lived in Sydney maybe 3 or 4 years prior to my diagnosis, so I had lots of friends over there, and I felt good once the chemotherapy, I guess, was out of my system. I was feeling fit and well. I remember going for the scan and asking the person doing the scanning, "Can you tell me if it's still there or not, if there's any cancer there?" And he says, we're not allowed to tell you. I said, "Look, I'm pretty sure it is. I'd rather know." And he said, "Rightio." And he goes, "Yeah, you've still got cancer." So I remember feeling physically fit, mentally fine, and I dealt with it fine. I wasn't upset. But all I remember is getting a little soft top convertible car with my mate, driving up to the Central Coast, up Gosford Way, Newcastle, driving over the Sydney Harbour Bridge with the top down and Jimmy Barnes blaring and just enjoying life. And I saw things differently. I realised, well, this could be the last time I do something like this again. I'm going to need some more treatment. And I remember going into a club and just having a couple of bourbon and cokes, one in each hand, and just relaxing and listening to the loud music and getting quite intoxicated, just thinking, man, how good is life? And how have I not felt this way before? I was actually exhilarated. It was amazing just like breathing it all in, thinking, man, life is fantastic, and how lucky am I? So back to Christchurch, they decided to give me some radiation treatment. So I had 5 weeks of that in Christchurch, and that was over the summer. I stayed at Ranui House, which is next to the ward at Christchurch Hospital, but I decided to stay there by myself because I felt fine. So that was almost like a holiday. I didn't take any anti-nausea pills. I felt fine. And so that was a bit of a vacation. I'd walk into the city, hang out at internet cafes, go to movies, go to the pub, not drink. I wasn't drinking, but that was good. And after that, after the 5 weeks of radiation, they said, look, they took me aside. They said, Adam, can you come in and to see us? So I had a bone marrow transplant coordinator and a hematologist. And usually I just go into the regular waiting room and then into the doctor's room. It was a lovely day, and they said, Adam, look, how about we sit outside today? And I was always steeling myself for the news that there's nothing more they could do. I always thought one day this could happen. So as soon as I said, let's go sit outside today, shall we, Adam, on the picnic table? And I took a deep breath and thought, here we go. And they said, look, we don't think there's anything more we can do for you. They said, you're not responding to the treatment, and we think that's pretty much it. So it's like for me, it was like getting hit in the back of the head or the back with a shovel. And what they were telling me was going in one ear but out the other. So it's pretty hard to take it all on board. The hematologist did say, look, I've got some colleagues in Europe and I'm going to talk to them, but we just need to be upfront. We think that's all we can do. And my parents were staying at my brother's house, as was I. So I think I caught a taxi or a bus back to my brother's house and said, how'd you go? I said, oh, all right, yep. But I didn't tell them. I was very quiet. They said, "Oh, you're very quiet. Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I just don't feel that well at the moment." So I didn't say anything, and I didn't tell them that I was told that for years afterwards. And they always said, "Why didn't you?" I said, "Because I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want to put that on you." I didn't know how to be honest. But they decided, after chatting to some colleagues in Europe, that maybe I could have a bone marrow transplant. So they looked at using my own marrow or that of my siblings if they were a match. My twin sister wasn't a match. My older sister wasn't a match, but my brother was a match. There was a 25% chance that each of them could be a match. I'm really lucky my brother was a match. Then they offered me, okay, you can have, there's two types of transplants. You can have your brother's bone marrow or you could have your own. If you have your own, we'll give you probably about 3 years to live, because that's as much as we think you'd have if you used your own. Or if you use your brother's, there's about a 65% chance you get through it, but you've got more chance to live a longer life. But there's potentially going to be a graft versus host disease and a lot of complications post that. So I didn't have to think too hard. I just thought, well, I want to live to be a grumpy old so-and-so. And so that was what I decided I wanted to do. I wanted to, I guess, roll the dice and take a chance. So that's what I decided to do. And I didn't really understand what a bone marrow transplant was, but some of you might have more knowledge than I did at the time. But basically, they sucked out the bone marrow from my brother, from the sternum, which is rich in marrow, which is a blood product, and they had about a bag of that, and then they just intravenously, through a Hickman line, it dripped in there, and it took about 2 or 3 hours, and they said, well, that's it, that's your bone marrow transplant. So it's just like a blood infusion, I suppose. So that was the bone marrow transplant. But actually, just prior to that, I knew my hair was going to fall out again. So the one thing with cancer, it can bully you, it can pick on you, it can dictate to you, and there's not much chance of you doing anything on your own to fight back, other than to have your treatment. But what I wanted to do, I went to the hairdresser at Christchurch Hospital and said, I want you to shave all my hair off. I want nothing left. And I said, why is that? He said, well, I'm about to have chemotherapy. I'm going to lose my hair, and I want to dictate to the cancer. I want to, and the chemo. I want to be in charge. I'll say when my hair falls out, not the chemo. So that was one small thing I did, and that felt really empowering. And I think when you get the opportunity to take some power or some control, that's one thing that I always say you should do if you want to have some semblance of control. So that was just a small thing. But the transplant was tough. I had a lot of graft versus host disease. It really knocked me around. I got shingles. It seemed like anything that could go wrong with infection could. I had blood clots. I remember trying to urinate and getting blockages and then these massive clots. Having to force them out. It was terribly painful. I was catheterized several times. Obviously, a lot of lumbar punctures. I'm not sure if you've ever had a lumbar puncture, but it was the most horrific thing for me. I remember just the first time I had one, they didn't give me much sedation. And the nurse said, hold my hand, squeeze my hand. I said, I will break your hand if I have to hold on to your hand, because just the pain was awful. But so I had a few of them, but luckily from there, I was able to say, they able to give me midazolam. I'm not sure if you've had that before, but it relaxes you. It actually blocks your memory, so you have no recollection of it later on. When you're going through it, I remember the doctor telling me once, you were crawling up the walls in pain and screaming and yelling, and I'm like, really? I don't remember any of that. So that was a blessing for me, not knowing. But 10 milligrams of midazolam was my friend, and so yep, I had a lot of that. There were other times I had pain that I do remember, and I was on high dose morphine pump. Sometimes I had my own little slow release tablets that I could take. But I remember one time when my mum was in the room, and I was just yelping like a stuck pig, if you like, just begging for more morphine. I was in so much agony. It was absolutely horrific. And my mum was upset, and I just said, I pretty much ordered my mum out of the room. I didn't want her to see me like that, which I know must have been really tough for her, going back to, the accommodation. Thinking, her poor boy, going through all this, and he's on his own. But I didn't want her to see me the way she was seeing me. And I also remember later on chatting to my nurse that was with me, and I said, how do you cope? Because, you become friends with your nurses, especially when you're in hospital long term. I had a year and a half in Christchurch, in and out of the ward. And I said, how do you girls cope? Because you're not robots, you are people, and we become friends. And they said they struggled too. So I guess for them, I couldn't order them out the room. They needed to be there. But I remember begging for the morphine. I said, you got to wait another 20 minutes. And, those 20 minutes, it was the longest of my life, just, needing more. But, having to be patient. I remember the nurses. There were times where I didn't want to get out of bed, turn the lights on, get dressed, eat. I thought, well, if I just sleep as much as I can, all this pain I'm going through and discomfort, I can just sleep it off, and I'm that much closer to waking up and feeling better. But I didn't want to shower. I was just, I guess, wallowing in self-pity. But I remember my nurse, and she gave me some good advice. And she said, there's two ways you're going to leave this room: by walking out or in a box. She said, you choose. So that was pretty sobering and honest. And she was my charge nurse, the head nurse. And I'm like, rightio, well, okay, she's got a point there, because I don't think doing what I was doing was helping me, mentally especially. But, I guess I soon learned, and there's always posters in these rooms, get up, get dressed, sit there, sit in your lazy boy chair rather than just laying in your pajamas all day. It's not doing you any good. So I guess the piece of advice I got from her was, you need to do something. You can't just lay there. At the same time, I was going through, actually in between my treatment, I had a phone call from an old school friend in Greymouth, and there were two friends of mine, and their sister, she was 14, she was diagnosed with the cancer as well. And I didn't know her, but I met her, and we became very close friends. So she had her treatment in Christchurch at the same time as me. I went and visited her when I could up in the children's ward. And that was very sobering. While I said I wasn't feeling sorry for myself, it gave me a new outlook, I suppose, that, well, I was 29, I turned 30 during my treatment. I'd done a lot. I'd travelled, I'd lived overseas, in Australia and England, and I'd been a publican. I'd done lots, and here's my young 14-year-old friend Gemma. She said, I've been to a school dance, and I've done this, and I've been to the Gold Coast, and I'm doing okay. I've done all right. So I'm thinking, well, here's me thinking, well, at 29, I've done all these amazing things and had a pretty good life, and there's my young friend Gemma thinking the same sort of thing. So we'd support each other, and I'd be at Ranui House overlooking the Avon, and I'd see her, walking past on the way to Ronald McDonald House, and so we kept in touch, and we'd ring each other up and try and motivate each other when we're feeling a bit rough in our room. But sadly for Gemma, she didn't make it. I think she lived to. I don't think she quite saw her 16th birthday, so that was very tough for me. I'm sure you've heard of survivor's guilt. Well, that's something that I dealt with for a little while. It's like, well, why me? Why did she survive? I survived rather, and why not her? So that was pretty tough. I struggled with that for a little while. But she was very strong, and I definitely gained a lot of courage from her. But yeah, that was a pretty tough thing for me. So a transplant, went through a lot of chronic fatigue post-transplant. I was lucky. I got through my, I got through things eventually. I know there were times where people were lighting candles for me. I was very, very ill. I don't think I was expected to get through it at times. I don't remember a lot of that because I was so unwell. But I like to say I got spat out the other side eventually, and got to come back to Greymouth. But I had chronic fatigue, which just wore me out. And it's one of those silent things that doctors can't put a finger on, like, why you're tired. They can't say, well, it's going to get better, or do this, or try this remedy. So I had that for a long time. I was back in Greymouth. I thought I'd get back into life as a publican, but I realised, well, I couldn't do the shifts anymore. I was just too tired all the time. Some days I think I felt fine, and others I didn't. So I sold my share of the pub, and I actually decided to treat myself. I went on a 2-month trip around the world, stopping with friends in Japan, the States, and England, and that was good for me. And I landed back in Christchurch, and I got a job over there just whenever I felt like it, just delivering flowers for a company. But I had a real lack of confidence being out of work for so long. Even the simplest tasks like driving a van and delivering flowers, I didn't have the confidence. I thought, well, what if I get this wrong? What if I screw it up? So my confidence from running a pub, which is quite complicated, I suppose, being in business and stressful, to something stress-free as delivering flowers, and worrying about getting it wrong. So I guess my confidence took a knock. And then I met my my now wife again at a rugby game. I was at Canterbury Otago Ranfurly Shield match at a pub before the game, just through a friend. Just met this English veterinarian who was working in Greymouth at the time, and of course I found her rather attractive, and she must have been drinking because she thought the same of me. Asked me what I did for a living, and well, just saying I did something as simple as, I just work part-time. I'm on an invalid's benefit. I didn't think that was going to win the day, but she didn't care. She liked me for who I was and not what I did or anything else like that. So after a couple of weeks, I ended up back in Greymouth, living with her at my parents' house. And then we moved in together and went back to the UK. And after 8 months, we got engaged. So, and I thought I still had my chronic fatigue. Thought I'd never work again. But she was really inspiring me and encouraged me to push myself a little bit more. And then a job came up. I volunteered with the Cancer Society in Christchurch and back in Greymouth, and a new position came up. So after 3 years, we were evaluated, and I thought, well, that's a really good service. Let's branch it out, widen it out to people with long-term complex health conditions of all sorts. So that's what we did after 3 years. I've been working in this role now for 17 years. It's something it's a really humbling role. Just getting to help people, that maybe feel a bit vulnerable about things. They don't know where to go. There's literacy issues here on the West Coast. There's a lot of men that might have worked in the bush or in the coal mines, and they're now living in caravans in the middle of nowhere, or out in the bush, and they just haven't got a clue of. We've helped people with no inland revenue numbers, and they're in their 60s because they've done possuming and they've bartered and and swapped, and all of a sudden they think they're going to get in trouble because they haven't got a tax number and they don't have a bank account. So there's all these complex issues. But sometimes it might be as simple as just supporting someone at an appointment, and just being another set of ears, because, as you know, when you get told some heavy news, sometimes you don't always take it on board. So I guess we just support people that way. So patient advocacy, trying to empower people, though. We don't want to be doing everything for them. We want to make sure that they can do as much as they can for themselves. Otherwise, we're not helping them if we do everything. Dealing with work and income, could be half-price taxi chits that the local council here provide. Dealing with Meals on Wheels, talking to the pharmacies. Like today, I had to get the district nurses wanted me to get a lockbox for someone's medication, but they wanted me to get one that looks like a book. So, if someone come in and look for medication, they'd see this Oxford Dictionary. So we're going to order one of them tomorrow. People that are all of a sudden not working because of their cancer or their health, and they don't have insurance, but they've got these bills to pay. So we just try and work out what we can do to help people. It could be helping with council houses, getting onto the council flat register, working with MSD and work and income, looking at like a Housing New Zealand house, making sure people are on the right benefits. Could be dealing with the Salvation Army, getting food boxes or anything really. So there's a lot involved with the health navigation, but we're always learning. We certainly don't know everything, but we also link into other health organisations around the West Coast as well. There's a Potuni Waiora, who are a Maori health provider. We just look to offer as many other services as we can. So it's not just us doing what we do. It's linking in. We also have a contract with. Have you seen the bowel screening kits that are sent out to all? Yeah, so we've got the bowel screening contract here. So it's outreach. If people don't send their kits back, I get to go up and down the West Coast, just visiting people, just to see if they've got their kits. Generally, they haven't. Generally they have. They just haven't sent them back. So I just go and say, look, I'm just here, courtesy call to make sure you got your kit. And if you have any questions, so we sort of encourage people to do those bowel screening kits. We've had some people here in town that have done them, and it saved their life. They've had early intervention. They've had some treatment, some minor surgery. So it's an important thing. Obviously, we've met people that have done the kits, and it's just been too late. So, I'm pretty humbled to have the role I have. I'm very, lucky to have got through what I've got. But one thing that I was never told is the word remission. People say to me, "How long have you been in remission?" I said, "Well, my doctors never used that word for me." I had to ask one day, "What does remission mean?" I said, "Oh, well, it's usually once there's no sign of cancer and you've been cancer-free for a certain amount of time." I said, "Well, I gather that's me." And, "Oh, yeah, I suppose." But no, so it's one word I'm not too sure about. But I'm just lucky. I went before I had my chemotherapy and radiation. I went to the fertility clinic in Christchurch and donated some sperm, which was the best thing I ever did, because I was infertile after all my treatment. But when was it? 2002. 11 years after doing that, I had my first daughter through IVF, and 2 years or so after that, my second. So very, very lucky. I'm a very patient wife, and she supported me for a while. Actually, when we moved in together, work and income said, well, your wife earns too much money, you can't be on the benefit anymore. So that was a horrible, really upsetting time. So, well, how am I supposed to pay my way? And she goes, well, she'll have to support you. So that's one thing that really upset with. So I didn't feel very I didn't feel very good about that at all. Actually, I was upset on the phone. I hung up on the WINS person who told me that. But lucky, I'd sold my share of the pub anyway by that stage. So I was lucky I did have some money in the bank, but it wasn't to spend on rent every week. It was for my future. But no, like I said, slowly got better and stronger, and I'm lucky. I'm lucky I'm here today.
So Adam, how old were you? It sounds like you kind of came out of it when you met your wife.
I'd finished all
how
the
old were
treatment.
you then?
I was 33, 2006. So about 30. When was it? About 34, I suppose.
So this
I
whole
wasn't
process
getting.
took you, what, 3 years or 4 years then?
Yeah, 4 years. I was not having any treatment. That had long gone, other than an infusion of like it's an intragram, I think it was called, just a blood product just to boost my immune system. But everything else was finished with that. It was just the fatigue I had.
Right.
Yeah, but the measure of her, she didn't.
There's definitely some words that you were using in there that is, that ring out. Things like survivor's guilt. That's quite something, isn't it? People have that and kind of and sometimes feel quite guilty about the fact that they may not have cancer now, and the buddies around them are still going through a treatment or so forth. And that was one.
For sure.
Thing you talked about.
I guess with the word survivor is not something that I use now. I don't know. I mean, I heard someone say they're not a survivor, they're a thriver. So I prefer to use that. Survivor makes sure like you got something through something pretty nasty, but I don't even want to give, my cancer, any credit at all. I mean, we had a bit of a scrap, you might like to say, and for now I come out on top. It's not something I take for granted. I certainly don't worry about it ever coming back. Hopefully my body's long since got it out of the system, but I certainly don't take it for granted. And I guess one thing I learned was even the word hopeless, because things were pretty hopeless for me, but even the word hopeless has the word hope in it. So I thought that was a really strong thing for me to think about. Well, there's hope there, even in hopeless. So
So has anyone got any questions for Adam? Things that kind of rung out there. Please feel free.
I'm sorry if I didn't come up for air and I just keep yapping, but I guess it's not something I talk about very often. But I guess once I start, I suppose it can. Sometimes I do get emotional talking about it. It's if I let my guard down, if you like. Not that I need to have my guard up, but recently I was at my mate's 50th and I'd had a couple of drinks and I was telling someone I hadn't seen for a long, long time about it. And I'm definitely not afraid to have a cry. Even thinking about today, I thought, geez, I hope I go all right. But it wouldn't bother me if I did. I'm not afraid to cry in front of grown men or anything. But, I always think you just got to go with how you're feeling. And if you're feeling like having a sob, no one's going to think you're any less of a man for doing that. And if you ever need help as well, mentally or emotionally, I saw a psychologist. The first time they asked if I wanted to see one, I resented it. I'm like, well, I'm not bloody mental. I'm not this or that. I'm just going for a bloody rough time and I don't want to see you. But then later on down the track, I thought, you know what? I will speak to someone. Because I felt like I was taking control. It's like when I shaved my hair. I was taking control. I was in charge. And it's the same with seeing someone, I'm feeling bullied and dictated to a bit by my feelings and emotions. I want to do something. So what can I do? I'm going to go and see someone now. And whether they helped or not is another thing. But I just felt like, well, I'm in control here. I'm going to make a call here and go and talk to someone. So even just doing that felt empowering. So when you get those opportunities to take control, just grab them.
So one of the things that has become more evident, I guess, with the network of men that we're involved with is that the concern that the family have that when you're the person with cancer and you're in the midst of it, of course, your head's around you and treatment and so forth, but you've got people extremely close to you who care deeply for you and wish the best for you and want to do whatever they can. And I guess now as a dad, you realise just how much your parents may have been really challenged, and brothers and sisters, and just tell us a bit about that.
Well, I never felt, like I said, I never felt sorry for myself or anything. I felt for everybody else. I was worried. My twin sister was here in Greymouth. My older sister was here. All my friends, obviously, and my parents, although obviously they spent their time with me. But I felt bad for everyone else. I was a publican. I guess with that, as you know, when local pubs, a lot of the people know the publican. So by default, you have a bit of a profile. So sort of everyone knows who you are, whether you like it or not. So I guess I felt bad for everyone that was worrying about me or upset. And, I heard stories later on how my sister would be crying in the supermarket when someone asked who I was. I mean, I'm glad I didn't know that at the time, because that would have made me feel 10 times worse. But that's a lot. That's a lot to take on board, as I'm sure some of you might feel the same as well. I'm not worried about I was never worried about myself or my mortality. It was more how everyone else was coping at the time. And I remember my parents coming into my room one day, and I said, "Please don't think that when you walk out of this room, I fall to pieces. Don't think I'm putting on a brave front for you guys. I'm very understanding of what's happening." And I know the gravity of what's happening or could happen. And it's almost like I'd made peace with that. I wasn't worried at all, but I was worried about them. And how
because they probably weren't sleeping either.
Oh, God, no. Like I said, that day I was in so much pain and I ordered Mum out of the room. Oh, man, I can't, she probably cried herself to sleep, and so that's the thing. I mean, you're dealing with the pain and the treatment and the god awful stuff that's happening to you, because it was the worst. I'd never wish it on anybody, and that's what you're going through. But then there's the emotional anguish and that everyone else is going through. And that's why I always say I was lucky I was single, no girlfriend, no wife, no children, because I'd hate to have put them through that. That would have been hell for me as well as them. So, I guess I was lucky it happened to me in the time of life when it did.
So in your role now as a health navigator, helping others that just get told cancer and then all they hear is cancer, are you finding that you are talking to the wider family or partners or wives and that as well, or not so much?
I guess no, not really. I mean, it's I guess a lot of the people are older as well, older than me that we see. So there's no, the children are probably adult children, possibly around my age or slightly younger. We don't see many young people, to be honest. There's some, the Cancer Society are very good and they do a great job. A good thing now on the West Coast, when I had my treatment, it had to be in Christchurch. You can now have chemotherapy here in Greymouth. So people aren't having to go away, and the support networks are here.
Good.
On some occasions, absolutely, you have to go to Christchurch because that's where the best care is. And if it's something that can't just be done in town, they do go away. But no, there's some really good support networks here, I think. But in saying that, I do get the odd phone call, hey, outside of work, hey, can you come and talk to so-and-so or have a bit of a yak? Or people are, and I'm more than approachable for that. I have no problem chatting to people.
Yeah.
But the cancer team here, oncology team here, is fantastic. We deal with them a lot, so they get to know where all the resources are. Who does what, and then if we get a referral to see them as well, well, we chip in there. But it seems like there's some really good support networks here now.
Cool. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time, everybody. And I do want to make sure that everybody that has a question to ask gets to ask it. So I'm going to open the floor up again. And whilst we've got a few moments left, if you've got a question, please do ask it.
One thing I will say, if anybody wants to chat at any stage, I'm more than happy to give Paul my phone number or email address. And honestly, I'm more than happy to take a call. That'll be my pleasure. Even if it's just to talk a bit of rugby or something, or about the mountain.
Yeah.
You can tell me what the mountain's looking like.
Yes. No, that's right. Look, I'm going to ask you one final question.
Yeah.
Were there any particular activities or things that you did, routines or whatever, during the process that you kind of used?
Well, going through my treatment.
Yeah. I know. What came out is your thought around being in control and kind of turning things around for you to make a decision. But was there anything else that you can pass on as advice or something? It's like, if you're going to do anything, this was high value for me.
Well, I guess it's little steps, baby steps. Mum used a phrase that I didn't understand at the time, was softly, softly catch a monkey, which is just doing things slowly. And sometimes I'll be looking for progress, thinking, well, nothing's changed in the last week. I'm not getting any better. But what I did do, which is really powerful, well, maybe look back a month or maybe 2 months. How am I placed compared to then? So don't look for little incremental daily changes, because you might not see them. Don't even look back a week, because you might not have noticed anything. But sometimes I'll look back, well, actually a month ago I couldn't do this. I'm getting my strength back and now I can. So don't be hard on yourself if you think I'm not making any progress, because you're probably doing it without even realizing. So that would be something I'd definitely recommend, is just to on how you look at things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Adam. That was really, really interesting. And well done. Coming through all that, like you say, you're in it. You just end up having to, take it day by day.
Yeah.
And we wish you all the best with what you're doing. It sounds like you're making a massive contribution. So, well done, and we hope that keeps going for you.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really, really humbling to be invited along to chat to you gents today. And, I wish everyone all the best in what you're going through as well, of course.